In recovery, and I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy to see everybody.
Hi, Theresa.
Hi, welcome back. We survived snowpocalypse or ice apocalypse last week. I am very glad to be out of my house, out and about. I was getting a little bit of cabin fever, but so I'm glad to be here tonight. And tonight, I'm going to talk about another one of those barriers that gets in our way when we are seeking to live our lives with a solid foundation of a relationship with Jesus. Our ideal goal is to be in intimate relationship with Jesus every minute of every day, and sitting in his grace and his peace every minute of every day. And that's what fuels our recovery and our ability to live life abundantly and the life that Jesus meant for us to have. But we fall short. We fall short of that every minute of every day. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So another barrier that I was going to talk about tonight is the habit of worry. And I call it the habit of worry because some people describe worry as a character trait, or as I'm just a worrier, or as a normal state of being. I just worry. Everybody worries. It's normal to worry. I'm a mom, I worry. I'm a dad, I worry. Life is hard, so we worry. However, that's a dangerous way to think about worry. And I think about it that way a lot. I think about it like, well, I've got a lot going on. I've got a lot on my mind. I'm juggling a lot of, tasks and duties, and that is all Theresa speak for. I worry. I spend a lot of time in my head, and it's justification for worry when I say I've got a lot on my mind. And what I'm doing there is I'm saying it's okay. It's okay that I worry. So there. And the Bible is very specific about the direction to us to not worry. We are instructed to not worry. There are very few things in the Bible, and especially in Jesus' teachings, that are repeated specifically. Things like love one another, things like do not fear, things like, that Jesus is with us, and of course the message of his salvation. But as far as behavioral directives that Jesus is speaking to us into our lives, and do not worry is one of them. Jesus speaks specifically about telling us not to worry. So this is something that we should sit up and pay attention to, instead of me in my little, justification, rationalizing. Well, of course I worry. Everybody worries. Well, that is at this point not going to be okay for me. I need to look at this as a habit that I need to address. The reason that I call it a habit is because worry is a behavior. It is a thought. Some people kind of mix worry and anxiety and fear all together, but really, fear and anxiety are an emotion. They are very much a physical reaction to what's going on externally or what's going on internally. And worry is the behavior, the cognitive behavior that fuels anxiety and fear. So worry is a thought disorder. And I don't mean like a mental illness. I don't mean that. I just mean worry is a thought that goes awry. And a lot of times it's a spiral awry. How many times do we start thinking about something, then we start worrying about it, then we start catastrophizing about it, then we start worrying about something else completely unrelated, because if that's going to happen, then this will happen. And then the spiral starts all over again. And pretty soon we realize, we've been sitting on the edge of our bed. Instead of praying, we've been sitting there for 40 minutes, just and trying to undo this knot of worrying. And we don't feel good. In the midst of that, at some point, we realize that we are separated from God in that moment. We feel alone and afraid, and that's where that fear and anxiety comes in. So, worry is very common. In a recent survey in the US, 59% of the people surveyed said that they were troubled by the amount of worry they experienced every day. So it's not something that just comes once in a while. And we know that Christians are in this mix of this 59%, as well as non-Christians. And it doesn't mean that we're not saved and that we're not a Christian if we worry. However, it is a behavior that separates us from our acknowledgement of the presence of God in our lives when we engage in that behavior. And we just keep going with that thought process of what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What if this happens? What if that happens? And then this could happen, and then. So worry is, it also has effects on our health. About a third of the visits to doctors are related to, are caused by stress-related illnesses and stress-related complaints. And a big portion of stress comes from in here. Yes, our lives can be stressful, so we can get stress from out here, but we know that what happens out here is not really what causes the stress. What causes the stress is our reaction to it, and that reaction comes from here. So people are getting sick from worry. People are having trouble sleeping. Even if you don't go see a doctor, people who worry a lot have headaches, they have higher chronic pain issues, they have all kinds of digestive issues. They just do not feel well physically, and we certainly don't feel well spiritually when we are caught up in a season of worrying a lot. So, and some of us kind of chronically stay in that stance of worrying a lot. So I was reading an article from a site that's called faithgateway.com, and I really liked the article. It's short, but I thought, oh, this is interesting. And so the article, of course, is worry. Worry is not your friend, and it's about Christians' approach to worry and how we have the greatest arsenal to combat worry that anybody has, and that is, of course, faith and trusting in God. And when we worry, we are relinquishing our stance of trusting in God. We can't do those two things at the same time. We can return to trusting in God as quickly as possible. So yes, we can be Christian. Of course we're Christian, we're saved. But while we're worrying, we're not giving the situation to God to solve, to hold, to make a way, to maybe not make a way the way we want God to, but to equip us to be able to manage in God's grace, no matter what happens in that situation that we're worrying about. So he basically says, he calls worry, parentheses, or not trusting God, has been a significant issue for many people, for many Christians. So he's not mincing words about what we're doing when we're worrying. We are relinquishing our trust in God. And he even coins a phrase that I would not fully adopt it, but it certainly got my attention. He said that people that worry chronically and that relapse into worry kind of as a comfort or as a distraction he has a term that he calls them Christian atheists, because they're Christians, but they have given up for that moment, they've given up their idea that God is omniscient, God is all-powerful, and that God is in control of this situation. So that really got my attention, and it convicted me, because I thought, well, that's not what I'm doing. I'm just thinking. I think a lot, and I'm not saying I don't trust God. I'm a thinker. I'm a smart person. I problem solve a lot, but the more I read about it and prayed about it, I thought, yep. Yep. These things that I worry about are all situations that, yes, I pray about them, I give them to God, and then I take them back, and then I do that little circle thing in my head. But what if I tried this? But what, I haven't tried this yet. But what if I did this? But what if I did that? And spend a lot of time in my head in that spiral. So, no matter what you call it, worry is the opposite of faith. And I like I said, I call it lots of things. So think about what you might call it as you are personalizing this to your own life and your own thought processes and your own thought patterns. What is it that you call it that kind of lets you go back to it without looking at it as a behavior that needs to be challenged? It is the opposite of trusting in God. It's the opposite of faith. So, and because we're instructed not to do it, it's in the Bible many different times, it is a sin. And so it does need to be addressed. Philippians 4:6, Paul tells us not to be anxious about anything. And Romans 14:23 says, everything that does not come from faith is sin. And since we live by faith, when we want to live by faith, that's why we're here. That's why we're growing. That's why we're learning. That's why I'm talking about this, because I want to live by faith. And this is something that gets in my way. So I want to address this. When we live by faith, we know that God has everything under control. That I can live peacefully in this moment, the next moment, the next moment, and know that God has everything in control and that He's with me, that He journeys with me, and that He makes a way before me. My next step is ordained by God's plan as long as I am staying in that stance of having faith in the goodness of God. When I step out of that, that's when I am, in essence, distrusting God's path that He's putting in front of me. When I step out of that peace in God's presence and I start thinking, but what's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen at with my business. There's not really a lot of money in the bank account, and payroll's tomorrow, and this could happen, and then that could happen, and if I had to lay somebody off, it would be terrible, and then this would be terrible, and then, oh my gosh, people will be mad at me, nobody will like me, I'm in this great quart of ice cream. And then I've just gone down this path of completely off the departure of the path that God had for me, which was, today, I'm sitting here in God's grace. And when I have faith in God's path, I know that my next step tomorrow is laid for me by God. So whatever happens tomorrow, God will equip me for that. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, God has not given us a spirit of fear or timidity, but of power and love and self-discipline. So we can also look at fear and timidity as anxiety or tension or worry or stress, and none of these things come from God. If God has not given us that spirit, then who has? Where is it coming from? It's not coming from a sacred being. It's not coming from our Holy Father. This is coming from, a lot of it comes from ourself and our self-will and our automatic thinking. We have a lot of automatic thinking, especially people in recovery have a lot of automatic thinking to address and to challenge. and the enemy. The enemy, especially when you're really, really in a stance where you want to be close to Jesus, you want to be close to God, you want to have this walk of faith, and you find yourself awake at 2 o'clock in the morning with all of these worry thoughts, and we can be attacked. We can be attacked that when the closer we are walking with God and the more that God is shining through us, the more the enemy may want to attack us. And so these obsessions and thoughts and habits are not from God. So we always want to keep that in mind. Jesus says in Matthew, do not worry about your life or what you will eat or drink, or about your body or what you will wear. Is not life more important than food, and the body more important than clothes? So, and in this verse, this article is saying that when Jesus uses that word for life, do not worry about your life, he means, Jesus is referring to every aspect of our life. He's not talking about, like, literally, if we live or die, because very few of us, hopefully, are worrying about imminent death. Generally, that is not what we're worrying about. We worry about non-life-threatening things all the time, and that's why it becomes so chronic, because we let ourselves worry about more and more and more things. And we worry about whether people like us. We worry about whether, we're going to have the same job in a year. We worry about the weather. We worry about whether a tornado is going to be coming next Tuesday. We have the capacity in these wonderful brains of ours to worry about anything. So when Jesus says, do not worry about your life, he means every portion of it. The next step in your life, your spiritual life, the path of your life. You don't have to worry about it. In fact, he says very pointedly, do not worry. And he's saying that because we don't have to worry. We have to have faith. We have to trust that Jesus, when he says that, he's saying, I've got you. Completely, totally, every minute of every day, I've got you. And him saying that is so beautiful. But the real beautiful part is, when we hear it, and when we believe it. So when we truly believe that when Jesus looks at us and is around us and is in our ear and is by our side and he says, I've got you, that we hear it and we believe it and we act on that. We walk in faith on that. And that is the opposite of worry. So the last thing I'm going to say about worry itself is that most of the time, worry is a control issue. We want to control the outcome of whatever situation or situations. And a lot of us want to control what's going to happen the next day, the next week, the next month, and the next year. And guess what? Just like we can't change what has happened in the past, we can't control what's going to happen in the future. But our brain, our human brain wants to control. And that is God's role. And in some ways, as I was reading this and thinking and praying about this, I was thinking that it's kind of like the original sin. We want to be as God. And that's what Adam and Eve were tricked by. Don't you want to be like God? And that's kind of like, don't you want to be the big boss? Don't you want to be in control? Don't you want to be calling the shots? And the humans said, yeah, of course. It didn't take much to tempt them or to trick them. So worry is kind of our little micro version of, yeah, I want to be in control. Even though it's only in our head, it's in our imagination that we're in control, but it gives us a sense of, well, if I did this, then maybe that would happen. If I did this, maybe that would happen. So it gives us a sense of control, but it's a trick. It's the same old trick. Don't you want to be in control? And the more that we spend time with that, the more that we actually sometimes get some comfort from it. And it can become not only a habit, but a relapse habit. So the more we spend time in that, the more we're separated from God. And that is not going to strengthen our recovery. That's not going to strengthen our relationship with God, which is really our two goals as we are working the steps and being in fellowship. This is what we're wanting to do. We're wanting to strengthen our recovery. We're wanting to strengthen our relationship with God so we can be of service to God and others. So, oops, it's after 7. I'm just gonna give a few last ideas, because I always like to say, so what do we do about this? We treat this as a habit. If you treat it as a habit, rather than use those other words, we treat it as a habit that we don't want anymore. It's a destructive habit. So, and if you think about other habits that you've had, that you've wanted to address. So let's look at cigarette smoking. That's a hard one. But it's a good habit to compare it to. When we want to stop smoking, we put together a plan. And we say, because we say intentionally, I want to stop doing this. I want to address this. So we don't just vaguely say, gosh, I wish I didn't smoke so much. It's really a drag. With feedback that we get from our fellowship, from God convicting us, from so many, our doctor, everybody says, oh, no, you need a plan, a specific plan to address this habit. So that's the same thing with worry. If you want to change the way you think, if you want to change this cognitive behavior that you keep going back to, you need a plan. So just like with anything, any other habit you want to address, you want to pray about it, you want to ask for God's wisdom about it. A really helpful tool when you're addressing a habit is start documenting what you're doing now. One of the first steps to stop smoking is you document when you smoke and what's going on when you're smoking. And I know it's annoying and it sounds terribly, time consuming, and but pick a day or two where you can tend to this. If you are really concerned about this habit of worry and it's getting in between you and your joy in relationship with God, and you really want to address it, then get a plan, be aggressive, and start noting. So when do I worry? What's going on with worry? I tend to worry when I'm bored. What a dumb thing to do when you're bored. But I started paying attention, and I discovered when I'm bored, all of a sudden, my brain starts like, yeah, I want to be in control of the world, then I wouldn't be bored anymore. Other ways that we address habits is we make a plan that says, okay, then when I'm bored and I note that I'm worrying, go for a walk, get some fresh air, spend some time in prayer while you're walking, make a gratitude list, make a list that catalogs God's faithfulness in my life. I can trust God. And that's the bottom line. That's what will address this habit of worry, is bringing our awareness, our thinking, and our focus back to, what am I worrying about? I can trust God. I do trust God. And that is the opposite of worry. And then you're back on the path that God wants you on. Sorry, I went a few minutes over. The end.